why housing prices keep going up. I
Mm.
think most people just accept it as a natural phenomenon, and they know that, hey, maybe one day if I can afford a down payment, it seems like it would be a good investment to, find some land or a house to buy. But I don't think most people understand why value of land goes up over time. I think maybe a big part of this message could be just letting people know, like, the reason is because of asset acquisition. Wealthy people are just buying up more and more stuff, bidding up the prices. And if you cannot afford a down payment or the price of an average home now, which is insane compared to what it was just 10, 20 years ago, you're kind of left in the dust. And there's not much you can do other than work really hard and sort of, be in the rat race for that much longer.
That's right. Now you have megacorps like BlackRock are buying like huge portfolios of homes, of like detached homes. Like really, these companies should be building rental buildings. That's a good scalable business that people need. But they're just buying homes, private homes, and renting them out because they can, and because they know that no matter what, the government will bail out the housing market and bail out the
This
banks.
is this is another great point. You're not just competing against individuals who are wealthy, who are buying property, who are involved in real estate. You're competing with companies like BlackRock. Like that,
Yeah.
that is, I don't think most people understand that connection.
That's right. I mean, yeah, and the more these companies are buying more than they need and huge holdings, like the more bidding pressure, the pricing pressure there is that puts prices higher and higher than they need to be. The banks are profiting big because they have nearly unlimited money to lend, and they become the landlord effectively in your life for
For
a long
people,
time.
for people who don't know what BlackRock is, could you explain? I want to get this point across because it's so mind blowing what your average homeowner is compared to what BlackRock is. What is BlackRock?
I love to hear that from you. You probably know more about BlackRock than I do. I think so. What do you think the impact of?
Well, what I know about BlackRock is they are one of the most successful hedge funds in the world. And I actually, this came up in our last podcast that we did with Noah Healy. They are a massive hedge fund. They own so many assets, a huge percentage of most of the biggest corporations traded on the US stock market. And they use AI, artificial intelligence, to beat the market and to make decisions. And they have some of the most advanced systems in the world to just keep building wealth and building power. And if you are an individual, looking to buy your first home or start a small business, that is what you're going up against, a megalith of a corporation that has resources you can't even imagine, you can't even fathom. Tying this back into artificial intelligence, they're leveraging that and have been for a very long time. I mean, financial institutions in this country have been some of the first and biggest adopters of the latest emerging technologies like AI, only to make themselves more powerful. And they don't need to hire, more people in order to do that, which, you could argue, hey, at least they're providing jobs. They're using software, they're using algorithms, they're using supercomputers to study markets, analyze prices, and to make decisions on what to buy, what to sell. And this is what the average person is going up against. And I honestly don't think many people at all are even aware or conscious of this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what you're outlining there is not only extreme imbalance of power, but one of the facets of that is information asymmetry. Because they have so much money and power, I've heard that companies like BlackRock are literally flying drones over areas and looking at factories and how many trucks are coming in and out, so they can predict in advance when a neighborhood will have a failing business, and they know, when they can short sell or buy and more, and like what company stocks to buy and when, because they have information before the market does. We can't compete with that. So you know how we checkmate them is we make all housing less attractive as an investment asset, but for everyone, including BlackRock, so that they get out of the business, or even better, they do the good part of the business, which is constructing and maintaining homes, not profiting off the part that nobody worked for. What do I mean by that? Is that we can keep a system if we make housing valuable as a place to live, as a home, as opposed to an investment asset. It means that the value of land is not privately appropriated, but the value of the structure is. if you improve your structure, you should be rewarded by selling it for a higher price than you bought it. If BlackRock builds like a million units, new units, they should profit off the building and selling of those units, not just off the underlying increase of land value. Because land has become 80% of the value of properties in the cities. It used to be half that, many decades ago, and that is just making the rich richer, and making working people work harder just to live. So we can checkmate all of that shit if we sign on to a system where we pay tax for the value of land as opposed to paying tax on our incomes, which means we're only rewarding the pro-social behaviors of building and maintaining, for instance, houses or rental properties, not just holding and realizing a profit from holding. Because these companies are getting into this not because they like being landlords, it's because they just want to get free money by holding for a long period of time and then seeing their asset value going up, because then they can refinance that and then buy other stuff with money that they never made or added value to society from. That's what economic rents means. So what that means is that, if we're going to checkmate BlackRock, it has to start in our own hearts. We have to be willing to give that up too, right? If only taxes that work are broad-based taxes. If we're all willing to give up this, if we're all willing to give up this land game, this way that we make money off treating homes and land as an investment asset, and instead of put our money in stocks or things that start businesses that help the economy, if we are only willing to give that up through a land value tax and income tax reduction system, then it'll get all the players out of the market, including the BlackRocks, including the banks, because the banks would be lending for the value of the home more so than the value of the land. If you have a land value tax, you're literally shifting money you used to give to the bank, instead you're giving it to the government. Because the bank is the one that would have been collecting, lending you more for like an inflated home price, most of which would be land, and they're just charging you rent for land. So if you're paying rent for land, a land tax to the government instead, you're not paying it to the bank. And the banks are doing what they're supposed to do, which is lend you money to finance human capital. Because land isn't capital. You can't create it or destroy it, but the home is capital. So banks should be helping to create more capital, not becoming rentiers themselves, profiting off rising land value. And if we did that, everyone long term would be better off. We'd have a better functioning capitalism. In fact, Karl Marx said that he didn't like the idea of land tax. He said it'll help capitalism last longer.
That might be another selling point for some folks on the political spectrum. Let's say an LVT is implemented. I think, because I think messaging is so important with this stuff. Obviously, the knee-jerk reaction of property owners and landowners would be automatic no. I do not want to support that because I'm going to have less money at the end of the day. I think the correct message in that you're not giving up the entire value of your land to the government, in this case, through this tax. It would be obviously a fractional tax, right? So let's say it's 20, 30%. I don't know what kind of numbers you've been messing with in your calculations, but I think an important part of this message is your home your property will be valued at this percent of what it currently is. I think something like a UBI would maybe have to be a part of this selling point for the property owner class, because otherwise, what are they getting out of it? So obviously for the person who's looking to buy land or buy a home for the first time, this would be a pro for them because it's going to decrease costs all the way around. So is there a way to sell an LVT without the other side of the equation of your home might be worth, 80% of what it was from this land value tax, but now you can receive universal basic income to offset that cost? And I don't know how the math plays out, but I can see in some situations where you would actually bring home more money through a UBI with a LVT versus not having either of those things.
Yeah, a lot of people believe that. So Sam Altman, who's the president of OpenAI, he believes that we actually need to find a way to share in the value that society is creating, and the best way to do that is by a 2.5% land value tax, as well as a 2.5% share equity tax on large companies, meaning large companies have to give 2.5% of their shares to a fund every year, and that fund pays people dividends, and the land value tax pays people dividends. So there's that view that we should share in the value of things that society is where societal progress in the end is capital stock and land stock. So maybe there could be a movement if shit hits the fan enough on the labor market and things get really bad. Maybe there could be a movement where a land tax funds UBI or funds the dividends, and people see the money coming back, and that would be appealing. So one of the problems right now is measuring the value of land. There's not a lot of good third party measurements of the value of land. By some estimates, the value of land is as high as 20 or 30% of gross national income, which is huge. In Canada, that would be like, it means the rent, if the value of land was that much, then its rental value that could be taxed would be like $500 million a year, which is more than the value of the federal government's complete revenues, and I think including halfway into the provincial revenues. So if that was taxed and dividended, I think it would probably be something like a $16,000 or maybe $20,000 dividend to everyone. So a homeowner would, especially if they live together as a couple, many of them would be ahead. I think more would be ahead than would be behind. But in Canada right now, we're using Statistics Canada as land value estimation, and when we figure how much land rent could be realistically captured, like 3/4 of the rental value of land, it's 194 billion. So it's much smaller, but it depends. Like, who knows? StatsCan isn't right. Like, they're not necessarily using like market transactions to determine this. So at 194 billion, that would pay about $7,200 a month. A year per person as a UBI dividend. That means that even a couple living together, I think the median couple might actually have to receive less than they'd be paying out. So that's actually a problem politically, right? So that's why even though I spent 5 years promoting basic income, and I think we need that, I've started to wonder about a blended model, or maybe even a full tax shift might be needed, so that at least more homeowners than not would experience tax relief if we switch it to a land value tax. Maybe they'd be paying out less after a switch from income to land than they're paying out before. But those numbers need to be run. We're still in the process of doing that. And where we have seen a successful shift to LVT was municipally, from property tax to land tax, where in Pennsylvania, some cities in Pennsylvania did a revenue neutral shift from property to land tax. I think in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, they increased the land tax 6 times and decreased property tax in exchange. And doing that left a lot of households with tax relief, paying less than before, and resulted in better efficiency, better productivity, more high rises in the main town. That generally is credited as having really helped the economy there, which is why the mayor of Detroit right now is proposing the same thing, shifting away from property tax and towards land tax. But the numbers there are pretty small, because they're not talking about capturing the full rental value of land. They're talking about just taking the amount of revenue they have now and shifting it from property to land, which would be small numbers, but enough to affect a good behavioral outcome in terms of people, maintaining their homes better, like building more high rises, less urban sprawl. Like those benefits would all happen.